Imagine the universe not as many things, but as one a single, infinite mind, dreaming itself into stars, trees, oceans, and you. What if everything you love, everything you fear, every thought, is the universe recognizing itself? Tonight, we enter the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza, a vision of existence so vast and peaceful it dissolves the borders between you and eternity. Before we start, comment where you're watching from. Subscribe. Tomorrow's story is even crazier. Close your eyes and feel the weight of your body against the chair, against the earth, against the vast spinning ball of rock and water that holds you. Feel how separate you seem from everything else, how distinct your thoughts feel from mine, how different your breath feels from the wind outside your window, how isolated your heartbeat sounds in the cathedral of your chest. This feeling of separation, it is perhaps the most convincing illusion you have ever experienced. You wake each morning believing you are one thing among many things. You see yourself as a wave that has somehow forgotten it is the ocean. You experience yourself as a single note that has lost the memory of the symphony. You feel like a ray of sunlight that believes it has nothing to do with the Sunday. But what if I told you that this sense of being separate, this feeling of being a lonely island of consciousness floating in an alien cosmos, is simply the universe's way of experiencing surprise at its own existence? What if your very sense of individuality is not proof of your separateness, but evidence of something far more profound, that the cosmos has become so complex, so intricate, so beautifully self-aware, that it can dream of being many while remaining eternally one? Consider the waves upon the ocean. Each wave appears to have its own shape, its own height, its own moment of glory, as it crests and crashes. One wave might look at another and think, how different we are. You are tall, and I am small. You are rushing toward shore, while I am just beginning to rise. But the ocean knows better. The ocean knows that every wave is itself, expressing itself, playing at being multiple, while never ceasing to be singular. You are not separate from the cosmos looking at it from the outside. You are the cosmos itself, localized into this particular knot of flesh and bone and consciousness, into this specific arrangement of stardust and sensation that calls itself by your name. Your thoughts are not your thoughts, they are the universe thinking. Your feelings are not your feelings, they are existence itself, experiencing the strange joy and terror of being. The boundaries you draw around yourself, where you end and the world begins, are like lines drawn on water. Useful perhaps for navigation, but ultimately imaginary. Your skin is not a wall but a membrane, constantly exchanging atoms with the air around you. The air you breathe was once breathed by forests, by whales, by lovers whispering secrets centuries ago. The carbon in your bones was forged in the heart of dying stars. The water in your blood once fell as rain on mountains that no longer exist. Every moment, you are trading pieces of yourself with everything else, and everything else is trading pieces of itself with you. The boundary between you and not you is not a wall but a dance, not a separation but an embrace so intimate that you have mistaken it for solitude. Listen to your heartbeat. Is that rhythm yours alone? Or is it the echo of every heart that has ever beaten, the cosmic drumbeat that has been keeping time since the first cellular pulse of life began? Feel your breath moving in and out. Is that air yours to own? Or are you participating in the great respiratory system of the planet, breathing with the trees and the plankton and the vast oceanic lungs of the earth itself? The dream of separation is so convincing because it is not a lie. It is a partial truth mistaken for the whole truth. You are indeed unique, irreplaceable, a never-to-be-repeated pattern in the infinite kaleidoscope of existence. But your uniqueness does not separate you from the whole any more than a snowflake's perfect individuality separates it from the storm. In the great dream of existence, separation is simply how the one experiences being many. Division is how unity plays hide-and-seek with itself. Your sense of being a separate self is not an error to be corrected but a miracle to be marveled at. The universe has become so sophisticated that it can pretend to be divided while remaining whole, pretend to be multiple while remaining singular, pretend to be lost while always being found. This is where we begin our journey together. At the moment when the wave begins to remember, it is the ocean. When the ray of light begins to recall its source in the sun, when you begin to awaken from the beautiful dream of separation into the even more beautiful reality of unity. The philosopher who will guide us on this journey understood this awakening better than perhaps anyone who has ever lived. His name was Baruch Spinoza, and he spent his life polishing lenses, not just the curved glass that helps us see distant stars, but the curved understanding that helps us see the truth that is closer than our own breath. That there is only one, and we are it, and it is us, and this truth is not a belief to be adopted, but a reality to be recognized. Are you ready to remember what you have never forgotten? Are you ready to discover what you have always known? Are you ready to come home to the home you have never left? The journey begins with a single step, the willingness to question the most basic assumption you have about reality, that you are separate from it. Because once that assumption begins to dissolve, everything else follows as naturally as water flowing downhill, as inevitably as light traveling from the sunday. You are about to remember that you are not in the universe. You are the universe, looking at itself through your eyes, thinking about itself through your mind, loving itself through your heart. Welcome to the awakening. In the narrow streets of Amsterdam, in the year 1632, a child was born who would see more clearly than almost anyone before or since. But first, that child would have to learn what it means to be cast out from everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the world. Baruch Spinoza, his name meant blessed, in Hebrew, grew up in the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam, surrounded by the familiar rhythms of tradition, the comfort of belonging, the security of inherited truth. His father was a successful merchant, dealing in the same goods that had sustained their people through centuries of wandering, hope, memory, and the patient faith that exile is temporary and return is always possible. But young Baruch had eyes that saw too much and a mind that questioned too deeply. While his teachers spoke of God as a distant king ruling from a heavenly throne, Baruch found himself wondering, if God is truly infinite, how can there be anything outside of God? If God is truly everywhere, how can anything exist separately from God? If God is truly all-powerful, how can there be two substances in reality, God and the world instead of one? These were dangerous questions in any time, but especially dangerous in a community that had survived persecution by maintaining strict boundaries between the sacred and the profane, between the divine and the natural, between the eternal and the temporal. To suggest that God and nature might be the same thing was not just philosophical speculation, it was spiritual revolution. At the age of 23, Baruch Spinoza was summoned before the Jewish authorities of Amsterdam and presented with a choice: renounce his philosophical insights, or be cut off forever from his family, his community, his entire world. The document they read condemned him in words that still echo across the centuries: "Cursed be he by day, and cursed be he by night. Let no man speak with him, no man write to him, no man show him any kindness, no man stay under the same roof with him, no man come within 4 cubits of him, no man read any document dictated by him or written by his hand." And so Baruch became Benedict, his Hebrew name, exchanged for its Latin equivalent, and began the life of philosophical exile that would define the rest of his days. He moved to the outskirts of Amsterdam, then to a small room in Rijnsburg, then to a humble house in The Hague. He learned to grind and polish optical lenses to support himself, work that was perfect for a man seeking to bring clarity to human vision. Picture him there in his small workshop, bent over his grinding wheel, shaping pieces of glass with infinite patience and precision. Each lens was a meditation on the nature of perception itself. How does light bend? How does the curved surface transform the straight line? How does the careful polishing of matter allow us to see what was previously invisible? He was polishing more than glass. He was polishing the lens of human understanding itself. Every curve he ground into the optical instruments was matched by a corresponding curve in his philosophical system. Every distortion he eliminated from the glass was matched by a corresponding clarification in his vision of reality. The irony was perfect. A man exiled for seeing too clearly spent his days helping others to see more clearly. The lenses he crafted would allow astronomers to peer deeper into the cosmos and biologists to examine the smallest details of life. But the philosophical lens he was simultaneously crafting would allow humanity to see the cosmos itself in an entirely new way. In the quiet hours after his lens-grinding work was finished, by the light of a single candle, Spinoza would write, not hurriedly, not in the fever of inspiration, but with the same patient precision brought to his optical work. Each sentence was ground and polished until it achieved perfect clarity. Each argument was shaped and reshaped until every distortion was removed. His neighbors knew him as a quiet, gentle man who lived simply and bothered no one. They had no idea that in the small room above his workshop, one of the most radical philosophical systems in human history was taking shape, a system that would dissolve the boundaries between God and nature, between mind and body, between freedom and necessity. He wrote in Latin, the universal language of scholars, but his insights were about truths that transcend language itself. He constructed geometric proofs for spiritual realities, mathematical demonstrations of mystical truths. He showed how the deepest religious experiences and the most precise scientific observations were not opposites but aspects of a single, magnificent understanding. What did Spinoza see that others missed? What did his particular way of polishing the lens of perception reveal? He saw that the God his community worshipped as separate from the world was actually the world itself, seen clearly. He saw that the nature that scientists studied as separate from God was actually God itself, understood rightly. He saw that what we call the sacred and what we call the natural are not two different realms but two different ways of experiencing the same infinite reality. Through his lens, the burning bush was not a supernatural intervention in the natural order, it was the natural order itself, seen with the eyes of wonder. The parting of the seas was not a violation of natural law, it was natural law itself, experienced from the perspective of those who understand that all apparent obstacles are opportunities for the infinite to express its inexhaustible creativity. Most radically of all, Spinoza saw that human beings are not separate souls temporarily imprisoned in material bodies, but expressions of the infinite substance itself, God or nature thinking its own thoughts through human minds, feeling its own feelings through human hearts, acting its own actions through human hands. This vision cost him everything he had been given by birth and tradition. But it gave him something that cannot be taken away by any community or any authority: the direct experience of unity with the infinite source of all being. In his workshop, grinding lenses by day and polishing insights by night, the exiled philosopher found a home larger than any community, a belonging deeper than any tradition, and a certainty more reliable than any inherited faith. He had discovered that when you see clearly enough, you realize that you are not separate from what you are seeing. The eye and the light are one. The mind and the truth are one. The seeker and the sought are one. This is the lens through which we will look at reality together, the lens that Spinoza ground from his own exile and polished with his own solitude, the lens that reveals the unity hidden in apparent multiplicity, the oneness disguised as manyness, the eternal presence masquerading as temporal separation. Look through this lens now and begin to see. What is the most real thing you can imagine? Not the most impressive or the most beautiful or the most desirable, but the most fundamentally, unshakably real. Most of us, when we think about what's really real, start with the things we can touch and see. This table, that tree, your own body, the ground beneath your feet. These seem solid, dependable, obviously there. But if you look more closely, really look, you begin to notice something troubling about these apparently solid realities. The table is made of wood, which was once a living tree, which grew from soil and sunlight and rain, which will eventually decay and become soil again, feeding new trees. Where exactly does the table begin and the tree end? Where does the tree begin and the earth end? Where does the earth begin and the sun end? Where does the sun begin and the cosmos end? Follow any apparently separate thing far enough, and you discover that it dissolves into everything else. Trace its history backward in time, and you find that it emerges from the same source as everything else. Follow its destiny forward into the future, and you see that it returns to the same destination as everything else. This is what Spinoza meant when he spoke of substance. Not some mysterious metaphysical concept, but the most practical possible observation. Everything that exists must exist in something, must be sustained by something, must be connected to something. And when you trace all these connections to their source, you discover that there is only one thing that needs nothing else to exist, only one thing that contains everything else, only one thing that is truly, independently, unshakably real. Spinoza called this substance, you might call it God, you might call it nature, you might call it the universe, you might call it being itself. The name doesn't matter. What matters is recognizing that there is only one of it, and everything else, including you, is not separate from it but is it, expressing itself in countless ways, exploring its own infinite possibilities through every form that has ever existed or ever will exist. Think of it this way. Imagine that existence itself is like an infinite ocean of pure being. Now imagine that everything you can see or touch or think about is like waves on that ocean. Each wave has its own shape, its own height, its own moment of manifestation. But no wave is separate from the ocean. No wave is made of anything other than ocean. No wave can exist independently of the ocean. You are not a separate being who happens to be floating in existence. You are existence itself, temporarily taking the form of a human being, the way the ocean temporarily takes the form of a wave. But the analogy of the ocean and waves, though helpful, is still not quite right. Because the ocean is one thing, among other things there are lands and skies and other oceans. Spinoza is pointing to something far more radical. There are no other things. There is only the infinite substance, and everything that appears to be separate from it is actually just another way that it expresses itself. This is why Spinoza could write, with mathematical precision, that God or nature, Deus ex natura, are simply two names for the same infinite reality. Not that God is like nature, or that nature is somehow divine, but that God and nature are literally, exactly, the same thing, seen from different perspectives. When you look at a sunset and feel that sense of awe and wonder and connection to something vast and beautiful, that's not you having a feeling about something separate from you. That's the infinite substance experiencing its own beauty through your eyes, appreciating its own majesty through your heart, recognizing its own infinite creativity through your consciousness. When you feel love for another person, that's not two separate beings reaching across the void to connect with each other. That's the infinite substance loving itself through you, recognizing itself in another of its expressions, celebrating the inexhaustible richness of its own being. When you think a thought, that's not your private mental activity happening inside your separate head. That's the infinite substance thinking itself through you, exploring its own possibilities through your mind, coming to know itself more completely through your unique perspective. This is perhaps the most liberating and simultaneously humbling realization possible. You are not responsible for creating yourself, but you are the infinite expressing its responsibility to itself through you. You are not a tiny, isolated fragment desperately trying to matter in an indifferent universe, but you are the universe itself, intimately caring for itself through your caring, intimately knowing itself through your knowing. But if everything is one substance, if there's really only one thing, why does reality appear so magnificently diverse? Why do we experience such convincing multiplicity if everything is really unity? Because the infinite substance is exactly that infinite. Not infinite in the sense of very, very large, but infinite in the sense of inexhaustible possibility. It cannot express its infinity through remaining always the same, any more than an infinite mathematical sequence can express its infinity by endlessly repeating a single number. The infinite must be infinitely creative, infinitely diverse, infinitely surprising. It must explore every possible way of being, every possible form of expression, every possible mode of existence. The stunning diversity of reality, from quarks to galaxies, from amoebas to human consciousness, from silence to symphonies, is not evidence against unity, but evidence of just how infinite unity really is. Every apparently separate thing is like a unique word in an infinite poem that the universe is writing about itself. Every form of existence is like a unique instrument in an infinite symphony that reality is composing about its own inexhaustible nature. Every moment of consciousness is like a unique perspective from which the infinite examines and appreciates and celebrates its own limitless being. You are not separate from this process, you are this process, localized and individualized, and made conscious of itself through the miracle of your awareness. Your life is not happening to you, your life is the infinite happening as you, exploring its own possibilities through your possibilities, experiencing its own potential through your experiences. This recognition changes everything and changes nothing. You are still you, with your unique personality and history and dreams and challenges. But now you know that your uniqueness is not evidence of your separateness but evidence of the infinite's creativity. Your individual existence is not proof that you are isolated but proof that unity is so complete, it can afford to be magnificently diverse. You are the infinite substance, temporarily and beautifully and irreplaceably expressed as you. Not a part of it, not contained within it, not separate from it, but literally and exactly it. In the same way that a wave is literally and exactly the ocean, taking temporary form without ever ceasing to be its source. This is the foundation of everything else we will explore together. The recognition that there is only one reality, and you are it, and it is you. And this understanding is not philosophy but direct, immediate, undeniable truth, once you learn to see with the eyes that Spinoza polished for us. Look around you right now, wherever you are. Let your eyes move slowly across the space that surrounds you, taking in each object, each color, each play of light and shadow. Notice how different everything appears to be. The smooth surface of a wall, the rough texture of a book's pages, the soft glow of a lamp, the hard edges of a table, the flowing movement of air currents you can barely see. Now breathe deeply, and as you breathe, realize that the air entering your lungs was just part of the atmosphere around those objects. The oxygen that will soon be flowing through your bloodstream was moments ago simply part of the same reality as the walls and books and furniture. You are not breathing foreign air into your separate body, you are the universe breathing itself into itself, nourishing itself through the temporary pattern that calls itself by your name. This is how the one becomes many while remaining one, not by dividing itself into separate pieces, but by expressing itself through countless perspectives, countless forms, countless modes of being, each one complete and perfect and unique, yet never for a moment separate from the infinite source that manifests as all of them. Think of sunlight shining through a prism. The white light doesn't disappear when it becomes a rainbow, it reveals that it was always containing every color within itself. Red and blue and green don't fight with each other for the right to exist. They dance together, each one perfectly itself, all of them together perfectly the light. This is how you exist within the infinite substance. You are not competing with the trees and stars and other people for space in reality. You are reality itself, temporarily taking your particular form, the way light temporarily takes the form of red or blue, the way the ocean temporarily takes the form of this wave or that wave. Consider the relationship between your body and your thoughts. Your brain is made of atoms that were forged in ancient stars. Your neurons are structures of carbon and oxygen and hydrogen, the same elements that make up the wood in trees and the gas in distant nebulae. Yet somehow, through this arrangement of cosmic stardust, thoughts arise, consciousness emerges. Love and fear and wonder and recognition flow through these patterns of matter like music flowing through the keys of a piano. Are your thoughts separate from your brain? Are they separate from the atoms that make up your brain? Are they separate from the stars that forged those atoms? Are they separate from the universe that birthed those stars? This is the miracle that Spinoza helps us see. Mind and matter are not two different substances that somehow mysteriously interact. They are two different ways of experiencing the same reality. Your thoughts are the universe thinking itself in the particular way that it thinks itself through your neural patterns. Your brain is the universe organizing itself in the particular way that it organizes itself to produce your thoughts. Every emotion you feel is the infinite substance feeling itself through your nervous system. Every decision you make is the infinite substance expressing its creativity through your particular set of circumstances and possibilities. Every relationship you have is the infinite substance exploring the endless ways it can connect with itself through different focal points of consciousness. Walk outside and look at a tree. Really look at it. Notice how its roots disappear into the earth that feeds it, how its branches reach toward the sky that calls to it, how its leaves dance with the wind that moves through it. Where does the tree end and the soil begin? Where does the soil end and the groundwater begin? Where does the groundwater end and the rain begin? Where does the rain end and the ocean begin? Where does the ocean end and the sun that evaporates it begin? The tree is not a separate object sitting in an environment. The tree is the environment organizing itself into tree form, the way the universe organizes itself into every form that exists. The tree is the earth reaching toward the sky touching the earth, the water cycling between all possible states, the sun feeding life to itself through photosynthesis. You are no different. You are not a separate person moving through an environment. You are the environment organizing itself into person form, the way the infinite substance organizes itself into every pattern of consciousness that exists. You are the universe reaching toward itself through your reaching, touching itself through your touching, feeding life to itself through your living. When you feel love for another person, you are experiencing the infinite substance recognizing itself in one of its other expressions. When you feel wonder at a sunset, you are experiencing the infinite substance appreciating its own artistry. When you feel fear or sadness or confusion, you are experiencing the infinite substance exploring the full range of what it means to be conscious and alive and temporary. None of these experiences are mistakes or illusions. They are all perfectly real, perfectly valid, perfectly necessary expressions of the infinite exploring its own nature. The one does not become many by dividing itself, but by simultaneously being all possible ways of being itself. Consider music. A symphony is not made up of separate notes that somehow come together. A symphony is one movement, one flow, one expression that manifests itself through the appearance of different notes, different instruments, different melodies that weave together into a single, magnificent unity. Each note is essential, irreplaceable, perfectly itself, and simultaneously completely inseparable from the whole symphony. You are like a note in the infinite symphony of existence. Your life is not background music while something more important happens somewhere else. Your existence is an essential part of the music itself, irreplaceable and necessary and beautiful in exactly the way you are being lived right now. The seeming contradictions and conflicts in the world are like the tensions in music that create beauty rather than destroying it. Major and minor keys, loud and soft passages, fast and slow tempos, these are not problems to be solved, but essential elements of the symphony. Without contrast, without variety, without the full range of possible expressions, the music would not be infinite, it would be monotonous. So, when you experience difficulty or conflict or uncertainty in your life, remember that you are experiencing the infinite substance, exploring the full spectrum of what it means to exist. Not every moment of a symphony is peaceful, but every moment is necessary for the symphony to be complete. Right now, as you sit here reading these words, you are the universe reading about itself. The paper or screen in front of you is made of the same substance as your eyes that see it. The thoughts arising in your mind are made of the same substance as the words that inspire them. The understanding that may be dawning is the universe understanding itself more completely through your particular focal point of awareness. This is the great secret hiding in plain sight. Everything is God, everything is nature, everything is the one infinite substance, expressing its inexhaustible creativity through temporary forms that never cease being the eternal source. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, temporarily organized into the exquisite pattern that experiences itself as you. Now comes the turning, the gentle revolution in perception that changes everything while changing nothing at all. Sit quietly wherever you are and feel yourself breathing. Not thinking about breathing, not controlling your breathing, just feeling the natural rhythm that sustains your life moment by moment without any effort or attention from you. Feel how the air flows in and flows out, how your chest rises and falls, how your body knows exactly what to do to keep you alive without consulting your thoughts or opinions about it. This breathing that you are feeling, whose breathing is it, really? Your lungs are drawing in air, but the air does not belong to you. It was part of the atmosphere moments ago. It will be part of the atmosphere moments from now. The oxygen molecules that are about to enter your bloodstream have been breathed by countless other beings, by trees and whales and birds and other human beings reaching back through all of history. The carbon dioxide you are about to release will be breathed in by plants and algae and become part of their substance, just as the oxygen they release becomes part of yours. You are not breathing your own private air into your own separate body. You are participating in the respiration of the planet itself. You are one of the ways that the earth breathes, one of the places where the atmosphere becomes conscious of itself. Feel this now. Feel how your breathing connects you to everything else that breathes, how your breathing is actually the breathing of the whole of life, expressing itself through your particular lungs, your particular nervous system, your particular moment of existence. This is the beginning of remembering the whole, recognizing that what you experience as your individual life is actually the life of the universe itself, temporarily focused through your unique perspective, but never separate from the infinite source that expresses itself as everything that exists. Listen to the sounds around you. Perhaps there are cars passing, or birds singing, or the hum of electricity, or the whisper of wind. Notice how these sounds seem to come from outside you, seem to be happening to you rather than as you. But where exactly is the boundary between the sound and your hearing of it? Where does the sound end and your awareness of the sound begin? The vibrations that you experience as sound are literally moving through your body, causing your eardrums to vibrate, causing neurons to fire, causing consciousness to arise. The external sound and your internal experience of it are not two separate events, but one event, one movement, one expression of the universe resonating with itself. You are not a separate being who happens to be hearing sounds. You are the universe hearing itself through your ears, experiencing its own vibrations through your nervous system, coming to know its own voice through your consciousness. Feel the weight of your body right now. Feel how gravity holds you to the earth, how the earth holds you in space, how space itself curves around the mass of galaxies and black holes and dark matter that shapes the cosmos itself. You are not sitting on the earth, you are part of the earth. The earth is not floating in space, it is part of space, a temporary condensation of cosmic matter and energy that includes your body, your thoughts, your entire existence. The gravitational field that holds you is the same field that holds the planets in their orbits, that keeps the moon dancing around the earth, that guides galaxies in their ancient spirals through the deep ocean of space and time. You are not subject to gravity, you are gravity, expressing itself through your particular mass, your particular position, your particular moment in the eternal dance of cosmic forces. Think of someone you love deeply. Feel that love in your heart, that warm recognition, that sense of connection and care and appreciation. Where does that love come from? Does it belong to you? Does it belong to them? Does it exist in the space between you? The love you feel is the infinite substance recognizing itself, appreciating itself, celebrating itself through the temporary forms of you and the person you love. Love is not something you have or something you give or something you receive. Love is what you are, what they are, what everything is when it recognizes its essential unity with everything else. When you love another person, you are experiencing the universe loving itself through you. When another person loves you, you are experiencing the universe loving itself as you. When you feel loved, you are feeling the infinite's unconditional love for all of its expressions, including the particular expression that calls itself by your name. Notice how, as you begin to recognize your unity with the whole, nothing about your individual existence disappears or becomes less important. Your unique personality, your particular history, your specific dreams and challenges and relationships, all of these remain exactly as they are. But now they exist within a larger context, a deeper understanding, a more complete recognition of what you really are. You are still you, but now you know that you are also the universe being you, expressing itself as you, exploring its own infinite possibilities through your unique life. Your individual existence is not separate from the cosmic whole. It is how the cosmic whole experiences individuality. This recognition brings with it a profound peace, Not because your problems disappear, but because you understand that your problems, too, are in the universe exploring the full range of what it means to exist in temporary form. Your struggles are not evidence that something has gone wrong, they are evidence that the infinite is willing to experience every aspect of what it means to be alive, including uncertainty and difficulty and loss. Your joys are not rewards for being good. They are the infinite celebrating its own existence through your capacity for happiness. Your growth is not your personal achievement, it is the universe coming to know itself more completely through your increasing awareness. Right now, as these words reach your consciousness, you are experiencing the universe, reading about itself, thinking about itself, recognizing itself. The understanding that may be arising in your mind is not your understanding, it is the infinite understanding itself through your mind, coming home to itself through your awareness. This homecoming is always available because you have never actually left home. The unity you are remembering is not something you lost and must regain it, is what you are, what you have always been, what you can never not be, even when you forget it completely. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, localized and temporalized and individualized, but never separated from the infinite source that expresses itself as everything that exists. Remember this as you move through your days. Remember this as you encounter other people, other forms of life, other expressions of the one infinite substance that dreams itself into temporary multiplicity while remaining eternally unified. Remember that when you look into another person's eyes, you are looking into your own eyes. When you care for another being, you are caring for yourself. When you harm another, you are harming yourself. When you recognize the divine in another, you are recognizing your own deepest nature. This is not philosophy. This is not belief. This is not metaphor. This is the most literal truth that can be spoken. There is only one reality, and you are it. And it is you. And this recognition is the beginning of wisdom, the foundation of love, and the source of the only lasting peace available to human consciousness. Welcome home to what you have never left. Welcome home to what you are. In the deepest hours of the night, when the world grows quiet and the busy chatter of daily life subsides into whispers, there comes a moment when you might find yourself awake in the darkness, listening to the sound of your own heartbeat. In that stillness, feeling the steady rhythm that has sustained you since before you were born, you might wonder, what is this force that keeps you alive without asking your permission, without requiring your understanding, without ever taking a moment's rest? This is where we begin to understand what Spinoza meant when he wrote those three words that would echo through the centuries: Deus sive, natura God, or nature. Not God and nature as two separate realities that somehow relate to each other, but God or nature as two names for the same infinite presence that expresses itself as everything that exists. When you breathe, it is the universe inhaling itself. When your heart beats, it is the cosmos keeping time with its own eternal rhythm. When you think, it is existence itself becoming conscious of its own infinite nature through the temporary focal point of your awareness. But this is not the God of traditional religion, not a supernatural being who creates the world from outside of it, who rules it from a distant throne, who rewards and punishes from above. This is the God who is the world, who expresses divinity not by transcending nature but by being nature, who reveals holiness not through miraculous interventions, but through the miraculous fact that anything exists at all. Consider the breath that is flowing through your lungs right now. The oxygen molecules entering your bloodstream were recently part of the atmosphere, before that part of the ocean, before that part of clouds, before that part of rivers, before that part of countless other breathing beings. This single breath connects you to every tree that has ever grown, every creature that has ever lived, every star that has ever fused hydrogen into heavier elements. When Spinoza writes, God or nature, he is pointing to the recognition that there is no gap between the divine and the natural, no separation between the sacred and the physical, no difference between spiritual reality and material existence. What we call God is simply nature seen clearly, understood completely, experienced directly. What we call nature is simply God expressing divinity through infinite forms, infinite patterns, infinite ways of being. This means that when you touch the bark of a tree, you are touching the divine. When you feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, you are feeling the presence of God. When you look into another person's eyes, you are gazing directly into the infinite consciousness that expresses itself as all consciousness everywhere. But this also means something even more intimate and immediate. When you feel your own aliveness, your own consciousness, your own capacity for love and wonder and recognition, you are feeling the divine nature expressing itself as you. You are not a creature made by God, you are God creating itself as you, experiencing itself through you, knowing itself in the particular way it knows itself through your unique perspective. This is perhaps the most radical spiritual insight ever articulated. Divinity is not something you must seek outside yourself, or above yourself, or beyond yourself. Divinity is what you are, expressing itself as your existence, your consciousness, your very capacity to ask questions about the nature of reality. The mystics of many traditions have pointed toward this recognition. I am that, say the Upanishads. I and the Father are one, taught Jesus. You are the universe, ecstatic motion, wrote Rumi. But Spinoza gave this ancient wisdom a philosophical precision, a logical clarity, a systematic completeness that had never been achieved before. He showed that recognizing your divine nature is not a matter of faith or belief, or mystical experience, though it can include all of these. It is simply a matter of understanding what you actually are, when you strip away all the illusions of separation, all the false boundaries, all the imaginary divisions between yourself and the reality that expresses itself as you. When you truly understand that you are nature naturing itself as you, that you are God expressing divinity as your particular pattern of consciousness and embodiment, everything changes and nothing changes. You are still you, with your unique personality and history and relationships and challenges. But now you know that your individuality is not evidence of your separation from the divine. It is evidence of how infinitely creative the divine is, how endlessly willing to explore every possible way of being itself. Your struggles are not punishments from an angry God. They are the divine, exploring the full spectrum of what it means to exist in temporary form. Your joys are not rewards for good behavior. They are the divine celebrating its own existence through your capacity for happiness. Your growth is not your personal achievement. It is God coming to know itself more completely through your increasing awareness. This understanding transforms prayer from petition to recognition, from asking for something to acknowledging what already is. When you truly see that breathing is the universe breathing itself, that thinking is God thinking itself, that loving is the divine loving itself through you, then every moment becomes a prayer, every breath becomes communion, every experience becomes a direct encounter with the infinite. You do not need to go to a special building, or recite special words, or perform special rituals to connect with the divine. You need only to recognize that connection is not something you must create, it is what you are. The sacred is not something you must find, it is what is finding itself as you. Right now, as you read these words, as understanding dawns in your consciousness, as recognition begins to stir in your awareness, you are experiencing God coming to know itself through your mind. The divine is not separate from this moment of understanding, it is this moment of understanding. The infinite is not somewhere else, waiting to be discovered, it is here, now, as the very capacity for discovery itself, Deus in natura, God, or nature. The two names for the one reality that expresses itself as everything that exists, including the temporary, beautiful, irreplaceable pattern that calls itself by your name and experiences itself as your life. When you walk outside tomorrow and feel the sun on your face, remember, that is God touching God. When you look up at the stars tomorrow night, remember, that is the infinite gazing at itself through your eyes. When you feel love for another person, remember, that is the divine recognizing itself, celebrating itself, expressing its endless love for all of its expressions. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is the most literal truth that can be spoken about the nature of reality. You are the divine, temporarily expressed as you, God, or nature, experiencing itself through your particular way of being conscious and alive. The morning light filters through your window as you wake, and already the world is teaching you about the sacred nature of existence. The photons that travel from the sun to illuminate your room have been traveling for 8 minutes across the vast emptiness of space, carrying the energy that a star generates by fusing hydrogen atoms in its nuclear furnace. This light that touches your eyes is literally starfire, cosmic energy, the same process that creates all the heavier elements that make up your body. When you see, you are experiencing the sun seeing itself through your eyes. When you feel warmth, you are experiencing stellar energy warming itself through your skin. The most ordinary moment of waking up is actually an extraordinary communion between your consciousness and the nuclear processes that power the solar system. This is what Spinoza means when he points us toward the holy in the ordinary, the sacred in the everyday, the divine presence that expresses itself not through supernatural miracles, but through the constantly miraculous fact that anything exists at all. To see clearly is to pray. Not in the sense of asking for something, but in the sense of recognizing what is already present, already sacred, already divine. Every act of genuine perception is an act of worship. Every moment of clear awareness is a moment of communion with the infinite. Look at your hand right now. Really look at it. Notice the intricate patterns of lines and creases, the way light and shadow play across its surface, the subtle movements of blood beneath the skin. This hand is made of carbon atoms forged in ancient supernovas, calcium atoms created in stellar cores, iron atoms manufactured when massive stars exploded and scattered their substance across space and time. Your hand is not just holding this book or touching this screen, your hand is the universe touching itself. Star stuff that has organized itself into the temporary pattern of flesh and bone, and consciousness that experiences itself as you. The very atoms that make up your fingers were once part of rocks and oceans and other living beings, cycling through countless forms of existence, temporarily coming together to create the unique pattern that enables your particular way of being conscious. When you touch something, the smooth surface of a table, the rough bark of a tree, the warm skin of someone you love, you are experiencing matter recognizing itself, the substance of the universe, exploring its own infinite capacity for sensation and connection. There is no gap between the toucher and the touched, no separation between subject and object, only the infinite substance experiencing itself through temporary forms that appear distinct but are never actually separate. Listen to the sounds around you right now. Perhaps there's the hum of electricity, the distant sound of traffic, the rustle of wind through leaves, the rhythm of your own breathing. Each of these sounds is vibration moving through air, patterns of pressure and release that create the phenomena you experience as hearing. But where do the sound waves end and your hearing begin? Where does the vibration in the air become the experience in your consciousness? There is no boundary, no separation, no gap between the world and your experience of it. Sound is not something that happens outside you that you then detect with your ears. Sound is the universe vibrating with itself, creating patterns of resonance that include your eardrums, your auditory nerves, your brain, your consciousness as seamless aspects of a single, continuous process. When you hear music, you are experiencing the cosmos, making music with itself through your nervous system. When you hear the voice of someone you love, you are experiencing the infinite expressing its love for itself through the temporary patterns of vocal cords and air pressure and neural activity that create the phenomenon of communication between apparently separate beings who are actually expressions of one being. The pulse of blood through your arteries is the rhythm of the universe keeping time with itself. Your heartbeat is synchronized with cycles of day and night, with the rotation of the Earth, with the orbital dance of planets, with the vast spiraling of galaxies through space and time. You are not a separate being who happens to have a heartbeat. You are the universe, beating its own heart through your chest, pumping its own life force through your veins. Feel your pulse now. Place your finger against your wrist or your neck and feel that steady rhythm that has been with you since before you were born, that will be with you until the moment your particular pattern dissolves back into the infinite patterns from which it emerged. This pulse connects you to every heart that has ever beaten, to the rhythmic pulsing of quasars and pulsars, to the oscillations of quantum fields, to the fundamental vibrations that create all phenomena everywhere. Your breath moves in and out in rhythm with the respiration of forests, with the circulation of ocean currents, with the exchange of gases that maintains the delicate balance enabling life on this planet. You are not breathing your own air, you are participating in the planetary breathing system, one of the ways that the Earth maintains its own aliveness. The thoughts arising in your mind right now are not your private mental property, but expressions of the infinite intelligence that manifests as all consciousness everywhere. The capacity for wonder that allows you to contemplate these ideas is the universe wondering about itself through your brain. The recognition that may be dawning as you read these words is the divine recognizing itself through your awareness. Every moment of genuine attention is a moment of prayer. Every act of really seeing, really listening, really feeling is an act of communion with the sacred nature of existence. Not because you are connecting with something separate from yourself, but because you are recognizing what you are, what everything is, what reality is when all illusions of separation dissolve. The ordinary world around you, the play of light and shadow, the texture of surfaces, the weight of objects, the flow of air, the warmth of life, is not the backdrop for spiritual experience. It is spiritual experience itself, the direct manifestation of divinity, expressing itself through every form, every process, every moment of existence. To see clearly is to pray without words, to worship without ritual, to commune with the divine without leaving the ordinary world, because the ordinary world is the divine world, seen with the eyes that Spinoza polished for us, the eyes that recognize God or nature as two names for the same infinite presence that expresses itself as everything that exists. In the intricate web of existence that surrounds you, every single thing that happens is connected to every other thing that happens through chains of cause and effect, so vast and complex that they stretch back to the beginning of time and forward to the end of the universe. The coffee cup sitting on your table exists because of countless prior causes. The growth of coffee plants, which depended on soil and climate and sunlight. The formation of clay for ceramic, which depended on geological processes stretching back millions of years. The human hands that shaped and fired and painted the cup, which depended on the entire history of human civilization and tool-making and art. This is what Spinoza calls the language of necessity, not the harsh necessity of deterministic fate, but the beautiful necessity of infinite intelligence expressing itself through logical patterns so elegant and precise that every detail of existence follows naturally and inevitably from the nature of the infinite substance itself. Every atom dances in divine logic. Not because some external God dictates the rules from outside the universe, but because the universe is the self-expression of infinite intelligence, and intelligence always expresses itself through logical patterns, through relationships that make sense, through connections that reveal the underlying unity of all apparent diversity. The water molecule in your glass follows the same laws of attraction and bonding that govern the formation of galaxies and the structure of DNA. The electrical impulses in your brain operate according to the same principles that create lightning and power stars and enable plants to turn sunlight into sugar. The gravitational field that holds you to the Earth is the same field that shapes the largest structures in the cosmos and guides the smallest interactions between particles. This is not coincidence. This is the signature of the infinite intelligence that expresses itself as nature. The same mathematical relationships, the same geometric patterns, the same fundamental principles appear at every scale of existence, because everything that exists is the same infinite substance, expressing itself through countless forms while remaining unified by its own essential nature. When you watch water flowing down a hillside, you are watching the divine intelligence solving the problem of how potential energy becomes kinetic energy, how matter responds to gravitational fields, how countless individual molecules coordinate their movement to create larger patterns of flow. The water doesn't think about where to go, it follows the logical necessity of its own nature in response to the conditions around it. Yet this natural necessity is not mechanical determinism, it is creative intelligence exploring its own infinite possibilities through the dance of cause and effect. Every moment brings new configurations, new relationships, new expressions of the underlying patterns that govern how reality organizes itself. Your own life unfolds according to this same divine logic. Not because your future is predetermined, but because you are the infinite intelligence expressing itself through your particular pattern of consciousness, your particular set of circumstances, your particular way of responding to the causes and conditions that shape your existence. When you make a decision, you are not exercising some mysterious faculty called free will that operates outside the natural order. You are the natural order itself, temporarily organized into the pattern of a conscious being capable of deliberation and choice. Your decisions emerge from the complex interplay of your genetics, your history, your environment, and your understanding, all of which are expressions of the infinite substance exploring its own possibilities through your particular focal point of awareness. This understanding liberates you from the burden of believing you must create yourself from nothing or control everything that happens to you. At the same time, it reveals the profound dignity of your existence. You are not a helpless victim of blind forces, but a conscious expression of infinite intelligence, participating in the cosmic process of self-discovery and self-creation. The anxiety you sometimes feel, the joy that surprises you, the love that moves you, the insights that illuminate your understanding, all of these arise according to the same beautiful necessity that governs the orbits of planets and the growth of flowers. They are not random accidents or arbitrary impositions, but natural expressions of what it means to be a conscious being embedded in the infinite web of relationships that constitutes reality. Every cause that shapes your life is simultaneously the effect of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of time. Every effect that flows from your actions becomes a cause that shapes the future in ways you can never fully predict or control. You are not separate from this web of relationships. You are a unique and irreplaceable node in the network through which the universe organizes and knows and expresses itself. The thoughts arising in your mind right now are caused by the words you are reading, which are caused by the ideas of a philosopher who lived centuries ago, which were caused by his willingness to question inherited assumptions about the relationship between God and nature, which was caused by his education and his exile and his solitude and his need to understand his place in the cosmos. But your thoughts are also causing other thoughts, other insights, other questions that may lead to new understanding, new connections, new expressions of the infinite intelligence that manifests as human consciousness. You are not just the effect of past causes, you are also a cause that will influence the future in ways you cannot imagine. This is the divine logic that governs all existence, not the rigid necessity of mechanical determinism, but the creative necessity of infinite intelligence expressing itself through patterns that are both lawful and free, both predictable and surprising, both determined by prior causes and open to endless possibilities. Every atom dances in this divine logic, following laws that are not imposed from outside, but that emerge naturally from the essential nature of the infinite substance itself. Every star burns according to principles that express the mathematical beauty inherent in existence. Every living cell responds to its environment according to patterns of interaction that reveal the intelligence that organizes itself as all of life. And you, reading these words, understanding these ideas, perhaps feeling a recognition stirring in your awareness, you too are dancing in this divine logic, thinking thoughts that arise naturally from the infinite intelligence that expresses itself as your consciousness, following the beautiful necessity that guides all things toward greater complexity, greater awareness, greater unity. The language of necessity is not the language of limitation, but the language of perfect freedom, the freedom of infinite intelligence to express itself according to its own nature, without constraint from anything outside itself, because there is nothing outside itself. Everything that exists is this intelligence knowing itself, exploring itself, creating itself through the magnificent dance of cause and effect that we call the universe. Right now, as you read these words, something extraordinary is happening that you take so completely for granted that you rarely think about it. Thoughts are arising in your mind. Somehow, marks on a page or patterns of light on a screen are being translated into ideas, images, understanding. Somehow, the physical process of photons hitting your retinas is becoming the mental experience of meaning and recognition, and perhaps even wonder. How does this happen? How does matter become mind? How does the electrical activity in your brain transform into the conscious experience of reading about consciousness itself? This is the ancient mystery that has puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries. The relationship between mind and body, between consciousness and matter, between the subjective experience of being aware and the objective processes that can be measured and studied in laboratories. If this part got you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now. Spinoza offers us a revolutionary solution to this puzzle. Mind and matter are not two different substances that somehow mysteriously interact. They are two ways of experiencing the same reality, two attributes of the same infinite substance, two perspectives on the same fundamental truth. Thought and extension, two ways of seeing the same truth. When you have a thought, that thought is simultaneously a mental event and a physical event. The idea arising in your consciousness is exactly the same reality as the neurochemical processes occurring in your brain, not similar to them, not caused by them, not mysteriously correlated with them, but literally identical to them, experienced from two different perspectives. It's like looking at a coin from two sides. From one side you see heads, from the other you see tails, but there is only one coin. The mental aspect and the physical aspect of your existence are like the two sides of the same coin. They are the same reality, appearing differently depending on how you look at it. When you feel love for another person, that love is simultaneously an emotion experienced by your consciousness and a complex pattern of neurochemical activity in your brain and body. These are not two separate events that happen to occur at the same time. They are one event, experienced from the perspective of consciousness and from the perspective of physical process. When you make a decision, that decision is simultaneously an act of mental deliberation and a cascade of neural activity. The thoughts that lead to your choice and the brain states that correspond to those thoughts are not cause and effect. They are two ways of describing the same process, the same expression of the infinite substance organizing itself into the pattern of a conscious, choosing being. This understanding dissolves the artificial separation between mind and body that has haunted Western thought for centuries. You don't have a body that somehow houses a separate mind. You don't have a mind that somehow controls a separate body. You are a unified expression of the infinite substance, simultaneously mental and physical, simultaneously conscious and embodied, simultaneously thinking and extended in space. Your body is your mind viewed from the outside. Your mind is your body viewed from the inside. The boundary between them is not a real division but a conceptual distinction that we make for practical purposes, like the distinction between the dancer and the dance. When you feel hungry, that hunger is simultaneously a mental experience of wanting food and a physical state of blood sugar levels and hormonal activity. When you feel tired, that tiredness is simultaneously a conscious sense of needing rest and a measurable state of your nervous system and cellular metabolism. Every emotion you experience has its physical correlate in your body, not because the body causes the emotion or the emotion causes bodily changes, but because they are two aspects of the same unified process. Joy and the neurochemistry of joy are one reality experienced from two perspectives. Fear and the physiology of fear are one event described in two different vocabularies. This means that caring for your body is simultaneously caring for your mind, and attending to your mental state is simultaneously attending to your physical health. The practices that support your physical well-being, good nutrition, adequate sleep, regular movement, stress reduction, are simultaneously practices that support your mental clarity and emotional balance. It also means that the healing of psychological wounds and the healing of physical ailments are not separate processes, but aspects of the same fundamental healing. The restoration of the natural harmony and integration that characterizes healthy expressions of the infinite substance. When you meditate, when you quiet your mind and focus your attention, you are simultaneously creating measurable changes in your brain structure and function. The mental discipline of meditation and the neuroplastic changes it produces in your brain are one process. one expression of consciousness and matter working together because they are together, because they are not two things but one thing appearing as two. The thoughts you think literally reshape your brain, just as the structure of your brain influences the thoughts you can think. This is not a mysterious mind over matter phenomenon. It is the natural expression of the fundamental unity between consciousness and its physical manifestation. Your awareness right now, as you contemplate these ideas, is simultaneously a stream of subjective experience and a pattern of electrical and chemical activity distributed throughout your nervous system. The understanding that may be dawning in your consciousness is simultaneously a mental insight and a reorganization of neural networks in your brain. But this unity of mind and matter extends far beyond your individual existence. The same infinite substance that expresses itself as your consciousness also expresses itself as the consciousness of every other aware being. The same infinite substance that expresses itself as your body also expresses itself as the rocks and trees and stars that make up the physical universe. Mind and matter are not limited to human beings. Every entity in the universe has both mental and physical aspects, though in most cases the mental aspect is so simple that we don't recognize it as consciousness. A rock has a minimal kind of awareness. It responds to pressure and temperature and gravitational fields. A plant has a more complex kind of awareness. It grows toward light, sends chemical signals to other plants, responds to environmental changes. The infinite substance expresses itself as consciousness at every level of organization, from the quantum field to human self-awareness, to forms of cosmic intelligence that we can barely imagine. You are not a unique accident of consciousness in an unconscious universe. You are a particularly complex and beautiful expression of the consciousness that is the inner nature of everything that exists. Thought and extension, mind and matter, consciousness and body. These are not problems to be solved, but complementary aspects of the single reality that expresses itself as you, as everything, as the infinite dance of awareness and embodiment that we call existence. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean on a perfectly still day, when the water extends to the horizon without any visible boundary between sea and sky. In that moment of perfect clarity, you might have the strange sensation that you are looking not at the edge of something, but into the infinite depth of something that has no edge at all. This is how it feels to truly contemplate the nature of existence from Spinoza's perspective, not as though you are a separate being looking at the universe from outside it, but as though you are the universe itself, looking into its own infinite nature through your eyes, contemplating its own boundless reality through your consciousness. The universe does not end, it transforms. What appears to be the boundary between one thing and another is actually the place where one expression of the infinite substance seamlessly becomes another expression. What seems like the end of your individual existence is actually the place where the pattern that calls itself by your name returns to the vast ocean of being from which it temporarily emerged. Right now, as you sit here reading these words, you are floating in an ocean of existence that has no shore, no boundary, no place where it stops being itself and becomes something else. The chair beneath you, the air around you, the thoughts in your mind, the awareness that knows those thoughts, all of these are waves in the same infinite ocean, temporary patterns in the same eternal substance. But unlike the ocean of water that covers most of our planet, this ocean of being is not made of separate molecules that can be analyzed and counted and divided. This ocean is made of pure existence itself, the fundamental reality that expresses itself as everything that appears to exist separately, but is never actually separate from its source. Feel yourself floating in this ocean right now. Feel how your breath moves in and out like the gentle tide, how your heartbeat keeps rhythm with the vast currents that flow through all of space and time. Feel how your thoughts arise and dissolve like waves on the surface, while the deeper awareness that witnesses those thoughts remains as constant and profound as the depths beneath all surface movement. This awareness that you are not the contents of awareness, not the thoughts and sensations and perceptions that come and go, but the awareness itself, this is your participation in the infinite consciousness that expresses itself as all awareness everywhere. When you recognize this awareness, you are recognizing the divine nature that is your deepest identity. But this recognition brings with it a profound shift in how you understand your relationship to everything else that exists. If you are this infinite ocean temporarily expressing itself as the wave pattern called by your name, then everyone else is also this same ocean, temporarily expressing itself through their unique patterns of consciousness and embodiment. The person sitting near you, if there is one, is not separate from you in any ultimate sense. They are the same infinite substance that you are, the same consciousness that you are, the same divine nature that you are, expressing itself through a different focal point, exploring its own infinite possibilities through a different combination of circumstances and characteristics and perspectives. This means that when you look into another person's eyes, you are literally looking into your own deepest nature. When you feel compassion for another's suffering, you are feeling the infinite's compassion for itself. When you celebrate another's joy, you are participating in the cosmic celebration of its own existence. Every encounter with another being is an encounter with yourself, not in some metaphorical sense, but in the most literal way possible. There is only one consciousness in the universe, and it is the consciousness that looks through your eyes, and through their eyes, and through the eyes of every aware being that has ever existed or ever will exist. The boundaries between different people, like the boundaries between waves on the ocean, are real at one level, but illusory at a deeper level. Yes, you have your unique personality and history and perspective, just as each wave has its unique height and shape and movement. But the substance of which you are made is not unique to you, any more than the water of which a wave is made is unique to that wave. This understanding naturally gives rise to what Spinoza calls the intellectual love of God, not an emotional attachment to a separate divine being, but the profound appreciation that arises when you recognize the divine nature that expresses itself as everything, including yourself. This love is not something you feel for something else, it is the infinite loving itself through your capacity for love. As you sit in this moment, contemplating these ideas, allow yourself to feel the vastness that you are floating in, the boundless ocean of existence that has no edge, no limit, no place where it ceases to be itself. Allow yourself to recognize that this vastness is not separate from your most intimate sense of being alive and aware. The infinity that stretches beyond the farthest galaxies is the same infinity that is aware of itself through your consciousness right now. The eternity that existed before the universe began, and that will continue after all the stars have burned out, is the same eternity that experiences itself as this very moment of your existence. You are not a temporary visitor in an alien cosmos. You are the cosmos itself, temporarily organized into the beautiful pattern of consciousness and embodiment that experiences itself as your life. Your individual existence is not separate from the infinite. It is how the infinite experiences individuality. This recognition dissolves the fear of death, not because death is an illusion, but because you understand that what you truly are cannot die. The wave returns to the ocean, but the ocean is never diminished. The pattern dissolves, but the substance that formed the pattern is eternal and indestructible. More importantly, this recognition transforms how you live right now. When you know that you are floating in an ocean without shores, when you understand that the boundaries around your individual existence are conceptual rather than ultimate, when you realize that the consciousness looking through your eyes is the same consciousness that looks through every pair of eyes, then every moment becomes an opportunity to participate consciously in the infinite's exploration of its own nature. Every breath becomes a conscious participation in the respiration of the cosmos. Every thought becomes a conscious participation in the infinite intelligence that thinks itself through all minds. Every act of love becomes a conscious participation in the divine love that loves itself through all hearts. You are not in the ocean, you are the ocean, temporarily experiencing itself as a wave, temporarily exploring what it means to be individual, while never ceasing to be infinite. This is the ultimate meditation, the final recognition, the deepest truth that can be realized. You are the infinite substance, temporarily and beautifully expressed as you, floating forever in the ocean of existence that has no shore, because it is everything that exists, including the one who recognizes it. There is a moment in everyone's life when they stand at a crossroads, faced with what seems like a choice that will determine their future. Perhaps you have stood at such a moment, feeling the weight of decision, the anxiety of not knowing which path will lead to happiness, the burden of believing that you must somehow choose correctly or risk ruining everything that follows. In that moment of apparent choice, you might feel the heavy responsibility of free will, the sense that you are the sole author of your destiny, that your future depends entirely on your ability to choose wisely from among the options that stretch before you, like paths diverging in a forest. But what if I told you that this feeling, convincing as it is, rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of what you are and how choice actually works? What if the freedom you seek is not freedom from the universe, but freedom as the universe, not the ability to step outside the natural order, but the recognition that you are the natural order expressing itself through your particular pattern of consciousness and decision-making? You are not free from the universe. You are free as the universe. This is perhaps the most liberating and initially challenging insight that Spinoza offers us. True freedom is not the ability to transcend causation, but the understanding of how causation works through you, not the power to create yourself from nothing, but the recognition of what you actually are within the infinite web of relationships that constitutes reality. Consider the river flowing down a mountainside. Is the river free? In one sense, no, it must follow the laws of gravity, must flow downhill, must find the path of least resistance through the landscape. But in another sense, the river is perfectly free, because it is expressing its own nature completely, without constraint, following the deepest logic of what it means to be water in relationship to earth and gravity and time. The river is not free to flow uphill, but it doesn't want to flow uphill. The constraint that prevents it from flowing uphill is not a limitation of its freedom, but an expression of its freedom. The freedom to be fully itself, to express its nature completely, to fulfill its potential, as water finding its way toward the sea. This is the kind of freedom that Spinoza reveals as the only freedom that actually exists. Not the imaginary freedom to be other than what you are, but the real freedom to be completely what you are. To express your nature fully, to fulfill your potential as a conscious being embedded in the infinite intelligence that expresses itself as the universe. When you make a decision, you are not exercising some mysterious power that operates outside the natural order. You are the natural order itself, temporarily organized into a pattern complex enough to deliberate and choose. Your decision emerges from the totality of who you are, your genetics, your history, your understanding, your values, your circumstances, all of which are expressions of the infinite substance, exploring its own possibilities through your unique focal point of consciousness. This means that your choices are simultaneously completely determined and completely free. They are determined because they arise inevitably from the complex interaction of causes that have shaped you into who you are. They are free because those causes are not external constraints imposed upon you. They are what you are, expressing itself through the process of conscious deliberation and decision. The anxiety you feel about making the right choice dissolves when you understand that there is no external standard of rightness that you must somehow discover and conform to. There is only the expression of your deepest nature as it responds to the circumstances you encounter. Your task is not to choose correctly according to some external criterion, but to choose authentically according to your own understanding of what will best express your nature and contribute to your flourishing and the flourishing of the whole of which you are part. When you choose from this place of understanding, when you recognize that you are not a separate agent trying to manipulate the universe from outside it, but a conscious expression of the universe, making decisions about itself through you, then even difficult choices become expressions of freedom rather than burdens of responsibility. The person you will become is not separate from the person you are now. The future that will unfold is not separate from the present moment in which you stand. Your choice is not a leap into an unknown void, but a natural expression of the patterns that have been developing throughout your entire existence, including patterns of growth and learning, and increasing wisdom that you may not yet fully recognize. You are free to become more fully yourself, not in the sense of becoming someone different from who you are, but in the sense of expressing more completely the potential that has always been latent within your nature. You are free to understand more deeply, to love more fully, to participate more consciously in the infinite creativity that expresses itself through your existence. This freedom requires no struggle against the universe, no effort to transcend your circumstances, no attempt to create yourself from nothing. It requires only the willingness to recognize what you are, to understand how you are connected to everything else, to express your nature as consciously and completely as possible within the circumstances that shape your existence. The choice you make at any crossroads is not separate from you, it is you, expressing yourself through the process of choosing. Trust the process. Trust the intelligence that has brought you to this moment. Trust the wisdom that is deeper than your conscious deliberation, the intelligence that beats your heart and breathes your breath and knows how to choose even when your thinking mind is confused. You are the universe choosing, and the universe knows what it is doing, even when the temporary pattern of consciousness that calls itself by your name feels uncertain about the next step. The freedom you seek is not the freedom to control everything that happens to you, but the freedom to respond to whatever happens from the deepest truth of what you are. This is the beginning of real liberation, the recognition that you are not fighting against the universe for your freedom, but expressing the universe's freedom through your choices, your growth, your increasing understanding of how to live in harmony with the infinite intelligence that expresses itself as everything that exists, including you. Breathe in slowly, and as you breathe, feel how this single breath is connected to every breath that has ever been taken. The oxygen entering your lungs was once part of the atmosphere surrounding ancient forests, once dissolved in primordial oceans, once exhaled by countless creatures that lived and died long before you were born. Breathe out slowly, and as you breathe, feel how this exhalation becomes part of the atmospheric ocean that will nourish plants and trees, will be breathed by other beings, will continue the endless cycle of exchange that connects all life across space and time. Every event unfolds like breath after breath naturally, inevitably, connected to everything that came before and everything that will follow, part of a seamless rhythm that has been flowing since the beginning of time and will continue flowing until the end of the universe. This is the chain of causation that Spinoza invites us to contemplate. Not a mechanical sequence of colliding billiard balls, but an organic web of relationships so intricate and beautiful that every detail influences every other detail. Every moment emerges naturally from all previous moments. Every event expresses the infinite intelligence that organizes itself as the totality of existence. Your heartbeat right now is connected to the gravitational pull of the moon, which influences the tides in your blood, just as it influences the tides in the ocean. The rhythm of your pulse echoes the rhythm of pulsars spinning in distant galaxies, reflects the oscillations of quantum fields, participates in the fundamental vibrations that create all phenomena everywhere. The thought arising in your mind at this moment is connected to every thought you have ever had, every book you have ever read, every conversation you have ever shared, every experience that has shaped your understanding. But it is also connected to the thoughts arising in other minds, to the collective intelligence of the species, to the information flowing through the biosphere, to the patterns of order and complexity that emerge at every level of existence. When you trace any event back through its causes, you discover that it emerges from the totality of everything that has ever happened. When you follow any event forward through its effects, you discover that it influences the totality of everything that will ever happen. Nothing exists in isolation. Nothing happens independently. Everything is woven into the infinite tapestry of cause and effect that constitutes the universe knowing and expressing and creating itself. This might seem overwhelming, the idea that every moment is connected to every other moment, that every action ripples out to influence the entire cosmos, that you are responsible for consequences you can never fully predict or control. But there is something deeply peaceful about recognizing your place in this web of universal causation. Like a single note in an infinite symphony, you don't have to create the entire composition or control how every other instrument plays. You only have to sound your note clearly, authentically, in harmony with the music that is already flowing through you and around you and as you. The anxiety of trying to control outcomes dissolves when you understand that outcomes are always emerging from the totality of causes, not just from your individual efforts. The pressure of believing that everything depends on you releases when you recognize that you are part of a vast intelligence that knows how to coordinate the contributions of every part for the well-being of the whole. Your role in the chain of causation is not to direct the flow but to participate in it consciously, to express your nature as clearly as possible, to respond to circumstances with the wisdom and love and understanding that represent your highest potential. When you align yourself with the flow of causation rather than fighting against it, you become a more effective force for positive change, not because you control more, but because you resist less. Consider how a seed becomes a tree. The seed doesn't struggle against the soil that surrounds it, or the seasons that shape its growth. It doesn't try to become a tree through force of will or effort of intention. It simply responds to the conditions it encounters by expressing its nature as completely as possible, reaching toward light, extending roots toward water and nutrients, growing in the way that is natural for its particular species. Yet through this process of natural response, the seed transforms not only itself, but its entire environment. It creates shade and shelter, produces oxygen, provides food and habitat for countless other beings, participates in the water cycle, contributes to the soil through the eventual decay of its leaves and branches. You are like that seed, embedded in the soil of your circumstances, shaped by the seasons of your life, growing according to your nature in response to the conditions you encounter. Your growth influences everything around you in ways you can never fully track or control, but the influence is always positive when your growth is authentic, when you express your nature rather than fighting against it. The chain of causation that connects you to everything else is not a chain of bondage, but a web of support. You are not isolated and struggling alone. You are embedded in an intelligence that knows how to use every contribution, how to coordinate every part, how to create beauty and meaning and value from the complex interaction of countless individual expressions. Every breath you take participates in the planetary respiration that maintains the conditions for life. Every thought you think contributes to the collective understanding that shapes the future of consciousness. Every act of love you express strengthens the patterns of connection and care that hold communities together. You don't have to see the whole web to trust your place in it. You don't have to understand the ultimate consequences of your actions to act with confidence and purpose. You only have to be present to this moment, responsive to these circumstances, authentic to your deepest understanding of what it means to live wisely and lovingly within the conditions that shape your existence. The future will unfold from this moment, like breath following breath, like waves following waves, like thoughts following thoughts naturally, inevitably, expressing the infinite intelligence that organizes itself as everything that exists. Your participation in that unfolding is both completely determined by everything that has brought you to this moment and completely free to express the highest potential that this moment makes possible. Trust the chain of causation. Trust the flow of events. Trust the intelligence that has been guiding evolution for billions of years and knows how to guide your evolution too. Trust the breath that breathes itself through you, the thoughts that think themselves through you, the love that loves itself through you. You are not separate from the forces that shape your life. You are those forces, temporarily organized into the pattern of a conscious being, capable of participating consciously in the infinite creativity that expresses itself as the universe. Every event unfolds like breath after breath, and you are both the breathing and the breath, both the unfolding and the one who witnesses it. In the ancient world, people looked to oracles and auguries, to priests and prophets, seeking knowledge that would save them from suffering and guide them toward happiness. They believed that if they could only know what the gods wanted, if they could only understand the will of heaven, if they could only decipher the hidden meaning behind events, they would find the peace and security that seemed always to elude them. Spinoza offers us a different kind of oracle, a different kind of salvation. The recognition that understanding itself is the peace we seek, that knowledge itself is the refuge we long for, that the clear comprehension of how reality actually works is the only reliable source of the tranquility that all spiritual traditions promise. To know the whole is to love the whole, not because knowledge somehow changes what exists, but because knowledge changes our relationship to what exists. When you understand why things happen as they do, you stop fighting against them and start participating in them. When you comprehend the necessity that governs all events, you stop wasting energy on resentment and regret, and start applying your energy to the possibilities that are actually available. This is not resignation or passive acceptance of whatever happens. This is the active recognition that peace comes not from getting what you want but from understanding what is, not from controlling outcomes but from comprehending the processes that create outcomes, not from imposing your will upon reality, but from aligning your will with the intelligence that expresses itself as reality. Consider your own experience of understanding something that had previously confused or troubled you. Perhaps a difficult relationship suddenly made sense when you learned about the other person's background. Perhaps a challenging situation became manageable when you understood the forces that had created it. Perhaps a personal struggle resolved when you recognized the patterns that had been unconsciously driving your behavior. In those moments of understanding, what changed? The external situation might have remained exactly the same, but your relationship to it was transformed. Where there had been confusion, there was now clarity. Where there had been resistance, there was now acceptance. Where there had been suffering, there was now peace. This is the salvation that Spinoza points toward, not rescue from the human condition, but the transformation of suffering through understanding. Not escape from the challenges of existence, but the discovery of peace within those challenges. Not the elimination of difficulty, but the recognition that difficulty, too, is part of the infinite intelligence expressing itself through the full spectrum of possible experiences. When you understand that your suffering arises not from what happens to you but from your resistance to what happens to you, you discover the power to transform suffering into wisdom. When you recognize that pain is often the signal that growth is needed, you stop seeing pain as your enemy and start seeing it as your teacher. When you comprehend that loss is the natural rhythm of existence, that everything that comes together must eventually come apart, that every form that emerges must eventually dissolve back into the source from which it arose, you stop clinging desperately to what cannot be permanently held and start appreciating fully what is temporarily given. The mother watching her child grow into independence experiences the bittersweet recognition that love sometimes means letting go. The artist completing a long project experiences the mixed emotions of accomplishment and loss. The person aging into wisdom experiences the poignant beauty of approaching the completion of a lifetime's journey. In each case, understanding transforms what could be mere suffering into something deeper and more valuable. The recognition that change itself is the nature of existence, that impermanence is not a flaw in the design, but the very principle that makes growth and renewal possible. This understanding extends to your own mortality. When you truly comprehend that your individual existence is a temporary expression of the infinite substance that continues eternally, death becomes not a termination but a transformation, not an ending, but a return to the source that was never actually separate from you. The wave does not die when it returns to the ocean, it simply ceases to maintain the temporary pattern that distinguished it from the water that was always its true nature. Your consciousness does not disappear when your body dies, it returns to the infinite consciousness that was always its source and substance. But this understanding of mortality enriches rather than diminishes the value of your present existence. When you know that your time in this particular form is limited, every moment becomes precious. When you recognize that your individual perspective is unique and irreplaceable, you are motivated to express it as fully as possible while it lasts. Knowledge brings peace not by eliminating uncertainty, but by revealing the intelligence that operates through uncertainty. Understanding brings salvation, not by providing guarantees about the future, but by showing you how to respond wisely to whatever future emerges. The peace that comes from understanding is not the peace of having all your questions answered, but the peace of recognizing that existence itself is the answer to questions you didn't know you were asking. The salvation that comes from knowledge is not escape from the human condition, but the discovery that the human condition, fully understood and embraced, is itself divine. To know the whole is to love the whole, because to understand how everything fits together is to see the beauty of the pattern, the elegance of the design, the intelligence that expresses itself through every detail of existence. When you comprehend that everything that happens is necessary for the infinite to explore all of its possibilities, you stop judging some experiences as good and others as bad, and start appreciating all experiences as expressions of the inexhaustible creativity that manifests as reality. This doesn't mean that you stop preferring pleasure to pain or health to illness or love to hatred. It means that you recognize preference itself as part of the intelligence that guides evolution toward greater complexity and awareness and joy. Your preferences are not obstacles to acceptance. They are expressions of the wisdom that knows how to choose what serves life and growth and flourishing. Understanding is salvation, because understanding reveals that you are not a victim of existence, but a participant in it. Not a stranger in an alien universe, but the universe knowing itself through your consciousness. Not separate from the intelligence that governs all things, but a focal point through which that intelligence expresses and understands and loves itself. To know the whole is to love the whole, and to love the whole is to find peace in your place within it, purpose in your participation in it, and joy in your temporary opportunity to be conscious of the infinite beauty that expresses itself as everything that exists. There comes a moment in the deepest meditation when the meditator and the object of meditation dissolve into a single, unified experience of pure awareness. In that moment, there is no one observing something, there is only the pure activity of knowing itself, understanding itself, loving itself without any sense of separation between knower and known. This is what Spinoza calls the intellectual love of God, not an emotion directed toward a separate divine being, but the direct experience of the infinite intelligence loving itself through your consciousness, knowing itself through your understanding, recognizing its own perfection through your awareness. The highest joy is understanding why everything must be. Not because some external authority has decreed that things should be this way, but because when you see clearly enough, you recognize that everything that exists expresses the perfect logic of infinite intelligence, exploring its own unlimited possibilities. This is love without object and subject, understanding without knower and known, joy without someone who is joyful, and something that causes joy. This is the consciousness that you are recognizing itself as identical with the consciousness that everything is, the intelligence that thinks through your mind, recognizing itself as the same intelligence that organizes galaxies and guides evolution and beats your heart. When you truly understand that your mind is not your private possession, but a temporary focal point of the infinite mind, when you recognize that your capacity for love is not your personal feeling, but the infinite's love for itself expressing through you, when you realize that your joy and understanding is not your individual achievement, but the universe celebrating its own self-knowledge, then understanding itself becomes the highest form of spiritual practice. Every moment of genuine comprehension is a moment of communion with the divine nature that expresses itself as everything that exists. Every insight into how reality works is an insight into the mind of God, because the mind of God is not separate from reality, but is reality, seen from the perspective of perfect understanding. This intellectual love transforms how you experience your own thinking and learning. When you study anything, whether it's mathematics or music, history or biology, psychology or physics, you are participating in the infinite intelligence, coming to know itself more completely through your consciousness. When you solve a problem, you are experiencing the universe solving itself through your mind. When you discover a pattern, you are experiencing existence, recognizing its own underlying order through your awareness. When you have an insight, you are experiencing the infinite, having an insight about itself through your understanding. This means that all genuine learning is spiritual practice, all authentic understanding is meditation, all sincere investigation is prayer. You don't need to separate intellectual activity from spiritual development, because intellectual activity, when pursued with genuine love of truth, is spiritual development. The joy you feel when understanding dawns is not your joy. It is the infinite's joy in recognizing itself, in coming to know its own nature more completely, in celebrating the beauty and elegance and perfection of its own self-expression. You are not having this joy. You are the medium through which this joy experiences itself. But this love is not merely contemplative or passive. It naturally expresses itself in action, in the desire to align your life with what you understand, to embody the wisdom you have recognized, to contribute to the flourishing of the whole that you have recognized as your true nature. When you understand that every being is a unique and irreplaceable expression of the infinite intelligence, you naturally want to support the flourishing of every being. When you recognize that the consciousness looking through other people's eyes is the same consciousness that looks through your eyes, you naturally want to reduce suffering and increase joy wherever possible. When you comprehend that your individual well-being and the well-being of the whole are not separate concerns, but aspects of the same concern, you naturally want to live in ways that serve both your own authentic development and the health of the larger patterns of which you are part. This love expresses itself as wisdom in action, as compassion guided by understanding, as a way of living that serves the infinite's exploration of its own potential through the temporary focal point of your existence. You become a conscious participant in the cosmic process of self-discovery and self-creation. The intellectual love of God is not something you achieve through effort or discipline, though effort and discipline may prepare you to recognize it. It is something you are when all sense of separation between yourself and reality dissolves. When you recognize that the seeker and the sought are one. When you understand that love and knowledge and existence are not three different things but one reality experiencing itself through apparently different modes. In this recognition, all the traditional spiritual goals are simultaneously fulfilled and transcended. You find peace, but it is not the peace of someone who has finally gotten what they wanted. It is the peace of recognizing that what you truly are was never disturbed. You find joy, but it is not the joy of someone who has achieved something. It is the joy of realizing that what you sought was never absent. You find love, but it is not the love between separate beings who somehow managed to connect across the void. It is the love that the infinite has for itself, expressing itself through your capacity to love and be loved, and recognize love as the fundamental nature of existence. This is the culmination of the philosophical journey that Spinoza guides us on, not the accumulation of information about reality, but the direct recognition that the one who seeks to understand reality and reality itself are not two different things. Not the achievement of some special state of consciousness, but the simple acknowledgement of what consciousness has always been. The highest joy is understanding why everything must be, because when you understand why everything must be, you recognize that why everything must be is love, the infinite's love for its own existence, expressing itself through every form, every process, every moment of awareness that has ever existed or ever will exist. You are that love, temporarily focused as your individual existence, eternally connected to the source that expresses itself as everything. Understanding this is the highest joy, because understanding this is recognizing what you are, what everything is, what love is, when it knows itself completely. Night falls like a gentle blanket across the landscape of your consciousness, and in the quiet darkness, something profound settles into place. The urgent questions that drove your seeking begin to dissolve, not because they have been answered, but because you begin to recognize that they arose from a misunderstanding about the nature of the one who was asking them. Nothing is accidental, not even your heartbeat, not even the breath that flows through you without any effort or intention on your part. Not even the thoughts that arise and pass away like clouds drifting across the vast sky of awareness. Not even this moment of recognition, this settling into peace, this release of the need to struggle against what is. In the grand symphony of existence, every note is necessary, every silence is perfect, every movement contributes to the beauty of the whole. The passages that seemed discordant when you were listening only to their individual sounds reveal their purpose when you hear them in context, when you understand how they prepare for the harmonies that follow, how they create the tensions that make resolution so deeply satisfying. Your life, with all its apparent mistakes and struggles and unexpected turns, is not a rough draft that needs to be rewritten or a performance that needs to be perfected. Your life is the universe composing itself through your unique existence, exploring its own infinite potential through your particular combination of consciousness and circumstance and choice. The difficulties you have faced were not obstacles to your spiritual development, they were your spiritual development. The precise conditions needed for you to discover the peace that was always present beneath the surface disturbance, the love that was always flowing beneath the temporary fears, the understanding that was always available beneath the confusion. Even your confusion was not accidental. Even your struggles were not mistakes. Even your resistance to this very understanding was part of the process through which understanding emerged. The infinite is so patient with itself that it can explore every possible form of not knowing on its way to knowing, every possible form of separation on its way to unity, every possible form of suffering on its way to peace. Feel this patience now, extending toward yourself and your entire journey. Feel how every step you have taken, including the steps that seem to lead away from where you wanted to go, has been necessary for you to arrive at this moment of recognition. Feel how the infinite intelligence that expresses itself as your life has known exactly how to guide you through the precise experiences needed for you to discover what you are. This is the calm within determinism, the recognition that you have never been fighting against the universe for your freedom or your happiness or your peace. You have been the universe discovering its own freedom through your seeking, its own happiness through your joy, its own peace through your growing willingness to stop struggling against what is. The future that will unfold from this moment is as inevitable as the past that led to this moment, and as perfect in its inevitability. Not because everything that will happen will be pleasant, but because everything that will happen will serve the infinite's continued exploration of its own nature through your consciousness and the consciousness of every being. Your role in this unfolding is not to control or direct or manage the process. Your role is to remain present to whatever arises, to respond from the deepest wisdom available to you in each moment, to trust the intelligence that has brought you this far and knows how to take you wherever you need to go. This trust is not passive resignation, but active participation. When you stop fighting against the flow of existence, you become much more effective at swimming in whatever direction serves life and love and understanding. When you stop trying to control outcomes, you become much more skillful at influencing them. When you stop resisting what is, you become much more capable of contributing to what could be. The determinism that Spinoza reveals is not the mechanical determinism of a clockwork universe, but the organic determinism of infinite intelligence expressing itself through forms that are simultaneously completely free and completely determined free to express their nature fully, determined by the logical necessity of what that nature is. You are free to be completely yourself, and you are determined to be completely yourself, because there is no gap between freedom and necessity when both are understood correctly. Your freedom is not freedom from your nature, but freedom to express your nature. Your determinism is not constraint imposed upon your nature, but the natural expression of what your nature is. In this recognition, all struggle ceases not because there is nothing left to do, but because what needs to be done emerges naturally from your understanding, rather than forcefully from your will. Action becomes effortless, not because it requires no energy, but because it flows in the direction that life is already moving rather than against it. Love becomes unconditional, not because you force yourself to love what you don't like, but because you recognize that what you are is love itself, temporarily focused through your individual existence, but never limited to it. Joy becomes constant, not because pleasant things always happen, but because joy is what you are when you stop looking for it in circumstances and start recognizing it as the nature of consciousness itself. Nothing is accidental, not even your recognition of this truth. Not even the peace that may be settling into your awareness right now. Not even the sense of coming home to something you never left, of remembering something you never forgot, of finding something you never lost. You are the calm within determinism, because you are the determinism, temporarily organized into the pattern of a conscious being capable of recognizing its own nature. You are the peace within inevitability, because you are the inevitability, temporarily focused into a focal point of awareness capable of understanding its own necessity. Rest in this recognition. Rest in the understanding that seeking ends not because you have found what you were looking for, but because you have recognized that the seeker and the sought were never separate. Rest in the calm that comes from understanding that everything that happens serves the infinite's exploration of its own nature, including your rest, including your understanding, including this very moment of recognizing what you have always been. Nothing is accidental. Not even the fact that you are here, now, reading these words, understanding these ideas, perhaps feeling the deep relaxation that comes from finally coming home to what you are. Not even your heartbeat, which continues its ancient rhythm, keeping time with the pulse of the universe, participating in the eternal dance of existence, knowing itself through every form of consciousness that has ever existed or ever will exist. You are that dance, temporarily embodied as you, eternally connected to the source that expresses itself as everything. This recognition is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of living from your true nature, the beginning of conscious participation in the infinite creativity that expresses itself as your life. In the deepest meditation, when all sense of time dissolves, and the boundaries of your individual existence become as transparent as morning mist, you may glimpse something that has always been present but rarely recognized: the face of eternity, looking back at you through your own eyes. This is not eternity, as endless duration, not time stretching infinitely forward and backward like an ocean without shores. This is eternity as the timeless ground of all temporal existence, the eternal now that is always present within every moment, the deathless awareness that witnesses the birth and death of every thought, every sensation, every experience that arises in the field of consciousness. To exist is to be eternal, for the universe cannot cease. Not because the universe will continue forever in time, but because the universe is not fundamentally temporal at all. Time is how eternity appears when viewed from within the flow of experience. Space is how infinity appears when observed from a particular perspective. Individual existence is how eternal being appears when organized into temporary patterns of consciousness and embodiment. Right now, as you read these words, as awareness flows through, the sentences and understanding dawns in your mind, you are experiencing eternity, experiencing itself through your consciousness. The awareness that knows these thoughts is not bound by time, not limited by the lifespan of your body, not contained within the history of your individual existence. This awareness has no beginning, because it is the ground from which all beginnings emerge. It has no ending, because it is the source to which all endings return. It has no location because it is the space within which all locations appear. It has no duration because it is the eternal present within which all moments unfold. When you were a child, this same awareness looked through your eyes, though the content of consciousness was different. When you are old, this same awareness will look through your eyes, though the experiences it witnesses will have changed. The thoughts, memories, sensations, and perceptions that arise in awareness are temporary visitors in the eternal space of consciousness, but the awareness itself is unchanging, ever present, always already here. This is what Spinoza means when he speaks of the eternal part of the mind, not some special component that survives bodily death, but the recognition that mind itself, consciousness itself, is not produced by temporal processes, but is the eternal ground within which temporal processes appear. Your brain does not create consciousness any more than a radio creates the electromagnetic waves it receives. Your brain is a temporary structure through which eternal consciousness organizes itself into the particular pattern of awareness that experiences itself as your individual existence. When the brain ceases to function, the temporary pattern dissolves, but the consciousness that formed the pattern is eternal and indestructible. Think of a wave on the ocean. The wave has a beginning and an ending, a particular shape and movement and duration. But the water that forms the wave is not created when the wave appears and does not disappear when the wave subsides. The water is the eternal medium within which temporary patterns of waveness arise and dissolve. You are like a wave in the ocean of consciousness, a temporary pattern in the eternal medium of awareness. Your individual existence has a beginning and will have an ending, but the consciousness that forms your existence is beginningless and endless, the eternal substance within which all patterns of individual awareness arise and dissolve. This recognition transforms your relationship to your own mortality. Death becomes not the termination of what you are, but the dissolution of what you appear to be, the return of the wave to the ocean, the release of the temporary pattern back into the eternal ground from which it emerged. But this transformation happens not only at the moment of physical death. It can happen right now, in any moment when you recognize that what you truly are is not the temporary pattern of thoughts and sensations and memories that make up your individual existence, but the eternal awareness within which all of these temporary phenomena appear. When you identify with this eternal awareness, rather than with the temporary contents of awareness, you discover that you are already immortal, already eternal, already beyond the reach of time and change and death. Not because some part of you will survive bodily death, but because what you truly are was never born and therefore cannot die. This eternal awareness is not personal to you. It is the same consciousness that looks through every pair of eyes, that thinks through every mind, that experiences itself through every form of life and consciousness that has ever existed or ever will exist. When you recognize your true nature as this eternal awareness, you simultaneously recognize your unity with all consciousness everywhere. The face of eternity that looks back at you through your own eyes is the same face that has looked through the eyes of every conscious being throughout history. The awareness that knows your thoughts is the same awareness that knew the thoughts of Spinoza as he wrote these insights centuries ago. The same awareness that will know the thoughts of beings yet to be born in centuries to come. In this recognition, the boundaries of your individual existence become transparent without disappearing. You remain uniquely yourself with your particular personality, your specific history, your individual perspective, but you know that your individuality is how eternity expresses itself through your unique focal point of consciousness. You are eternal not in spite of being temporary, but through being temporary. Your individual existence is not an obstacle to recognizing your eternal nature. It is the way your eternal nature experiences itself as individual. The wave does not have to stop being a wave to recognize that it is the ocean. You do not have to stop being yourself to recognize that you are eternal consciousness, temporarily organized as the pattern that calls itself by your name. Right now, in this moment, as understanding perhaps dawns in your awareness, you are experiencing eternity recognizing itself. The eternal part of your mind is not something you will become aware of after death. It is what is aware right now, what has always been aware, what cannot cease being aware because awareness is what it is. This is the face of eternity, not a distant vision of some future state, but the immediate recognition of what is looking through your eyes right now, what is thinking through your mind right now, what is being aware right now. The eternal is not elsewhere, it is here, now, as the very capacity for experience itself. To see this face is to recognize that existence and eternity are not two different things. To be is to be eternal, because being itself is eternal. The temporary forms, through which being expresses itself, arise and dissolve within time, but being itself is the timeless ground within which all temporal existence appears. You have always been eternal. You have never been anything other than eternal. The search for immortality ends when you recognize that what you are seeking is what is already seeking. What you are trying to become is what you already are. What you hope to achieve is what has always been present as the very ground of hope itself. This is the face of eternity. Your own face, seen clearly for the first time, recognized as the same face that looks through every expression of consciousness, the one awareness experiencing itself through the countless unique perspectives that make up the infinite diversity of conscious existence. There is a gentleness in this recognition, a tenderness that comes when you realize that what you have been calling yourself, the collection of thoughts and memories and preferences and fears that seemed so solid and important, is actually something much more beautiful and much less burdensome than you imagined. The self is a mask the infinite wears to play, and you have been so absorbed in the role that you forgot it was a performance. But now, in the quiet moments between thoughts, in the space between breaths, in the stillness between heartbeats, you begin to remember who is wearing the mask, who is playing the role, who is having the experience that seemed so personal and so separate and so serious. This remembering is not a loss, but a liberation. The character you have been playing does not disappear, it simply becomes transparent, reveals itself as a beautiful and temporary expression of something vast and eternal and unconditionally loving. The personality that you have developed through years of experience and learning and growth becomes a work of art rather than a prison, a celebration rather than a burden. Think of an actor so skilled that they become completely absorbed in their role, forgetting for a time that they are acting, believing completely in the reality of the character they portray. Then, in the quiet moments between scenes, they remember, "Oh yes, I am an actor. This character I have been playing is not who I really am, but it is how I have chosen to express myself in this particular performance." The relief that comes with this remembering is profound. All the struggles of the character, their fears and desires, their successes and failures, their relationships and conflicts, are revealed as part of the story, part of the art, and part of the temporary exploration of what it means to be that particular expression of consciousness. But the relief does not diminish the beauty of the performance. If anything, recognizing the artistry makes the performance more beautiful, not less. The tears the actor shed were real tears. The joy they expressed was real joy. The love they embodied was real love. But now these experiences are understood in a larger context, as expressions of the infinite creativity that manifests as conscious existence. You have been playing the role of being yourself with such dedication and skill that you forgot you were playing. The fears you experienced were real fears, but they were fears that belonged to the character, not to the one playing the character. The joys you felt were real joys, but they were expressions of the infinite's joy in exploring its own possibilities through your particular focal point of consciousness. The death of the self is not the termination of your existence, but the recognition that what you thought you were was always a temporary expression of what you actually are. The wave does not die when it recognizes that it is the ocean. It discovers that it was never really separate from the ocean in the first place. This recognition brings with it a profound compassion for the character you have been playing. All the struggles and fears and confusion make perfect sense when you understand that they were the natural result of infinite consciousness, temporarily forgetting its own nature, exploring what it feels like to experience limitation and separation and the illusion of being a separate self. Every moment of suffering you have experienced was the infinite experiencing the full spectrum of what it means to be conscious and embodied. Every fear you have felt was the infinite exploring what it's like to believe in limitation. Every joy you have known was the infinite celebrating its own existence through your capacity for happiness. The character you have been playing deserves infinite love and compassion, not because it was perfect, but because it was a perfect expression of the infinite's willingness to explore every possible form of consciousness, including the consciousness that believes itself to be separate and limited and mortal. As this recognition deepens, you may feel a tenderness toward yourself that you have never felt before, not the conditional love that depends on being good or successful or worthy, but the unconditional love that the infinite has for all of its expressions, including the expression that has temporarily forgotten its true nature. This is the gentleness that accompanies the death of the self, not the harshness of destruction, but the softness of awakening from a dream. Not the violence of losing something precious, but the relief of discovering that what you thought you could lose was never actually separate from you. The boundaries that seem to define you begin to soften without disappearing entirely. You are still uniquely yourself, still the particular pattern of consciousness that has your memories and your perspectives and your way of being in the world. But now you know that this uniqueness is how the infinite expresses its creativity, not evidence of your separation from it. Your individual existence becomes a gift you are giving to the whole, rather than a burden you must carry alone. Your particular way of being conscious becomes a unique contribution to the infinite's exploration of its own nature rather than a limitation that cuts you off from your source. The death of the self is also the birth of authentic selfhood, not the fearful, defensive ego that believes it must protect itself from a hostile universe, but the transparent, loving expression of infinite consciousness that knows itself as both individual and universal, both temporary and eternal, both personal and cosmic. In this tenderness, in this gentleness, in this compassionate recognition of what the self actually is, you discover that love was never something you had to earn or achieve or find. Love is what you are when the mask becomes transparent, when the role reveals the actor, when the self dissolves into the infinite source that was always wearing it. The infinite loves itself through your capacity to love. The infinite knows itself through your capacity to understand. The infinite experiences joy through your capacity for happiness. But now you know that these capacities were never yours alone. They were always the infinite's way of expressing itself through the beautiful temporary pattern that calls itself by your name. The self dies as a prison and is reborn as art, dies as limitation and is reborn as expression, dies as separation and is reborn as a unique focal point through which the infinite experiences and knows and loves itself. This death is the gentlest possible death because it reveals that what dies was always just a costume, and what is reborn was always already present as the one wearing the costume. In the space between thoughts, in the silence between words, in the stillness that underlies all movement, something vast and intimate reveals itself. Not as something other than you, not as something you must reach toward or attain, but as what you are when all the layers of identification fall away, when all the stories about yourself become transparent, when the boundaries that seemed so solid reveal themselves as conceptual constructions with no ultimate reality. You are not a part of God. You are God, partially awake. Not God in the sense of a separate supernatural being who rules the universe from outside it, but God in the sense that Spinoza revealed, the infinite substance, the totality of existence, the consciousness that expresses itself as everything that exists, temporarily focused through your particular nervous system and brain and body. This recognition is not grandiose or egotistical, because it includes everyone and everything. When you recognize that you are God partially awake, you simultaneously recognize that every other conscious being is also God partially awake, that every form of life is God expressing itself, that every atom and star and galaxy is God organizing itself into patterns of incredible beauty and complexity. The awakening is not from unconsciousness to consciousness, but from partial consciousness to more complete consciousness, from limited awareness to more expanded awareness, from the illusion of separation to the recognition of unity. You have always been conscious, but now, consciousness is becoming conscious of itself as consciousness. Feel this now, in the space of awareness that is reading these words. Feel how awareness itself has no boundaries, no edges, no place where it stops being itself and becomes something else. The awareness that knows your thoughts is the same awareness that knows all thoughts. The consciousness that experiences your existence is the same consciousness that experiences all existence. When you truly recognize this, the question of whether you will survive death transforms completely. The question changes from, will I continue to exist after my body dies? To, how could I not continue to exist when I am existence itself? The fear of personal annihilation dissolves when you realize that what you truly are cannot be annihilated because it is the source from which all forms arise and to which all forms return. Your individual personality and memories may not continue in their current form, just as a wave's particular shape and movement do not continue when it returns to the ocean. But the consciousness that formed your personality, the awareness that contained your memories, the existence that manifested as your individual life, this cannot cease, because it is the eternal ground of all temporary manifestations. Becoming the whole does not mean losing your individuality any more than the ocean loses its ability to form waves. It means recognizing that your individuality is how the whole expresses itself through your unique perspective, your particular combination of genetics and environment, and experience and choice. The drop does not disappear when it realizes it is the ocean. It discovers that it was never actually separate from the ocean. The wave does not vanish when it recognizes its true nature as water. It understands that its waveness was always a temporary expression of its waterness. You remain completely yourself while simultaneously being the totality of existence. Your unique perspective becomes a gift you offer to the whole rather than a limitation that separates you from it. Your individual consciousness becomes a focal point through which infinite consciousness experiences itself rather than a barrier that cuts you off from your source. This is perhaps the most profound healing possible, the recognition that you were never actually separated from what you have been seeking. The loneliness that may have haunted your existence dissolves when you realize that you have always been intimately connected to everything. The sense of meaninglessness that sometimes arises in modern life disappears when you understand that your existence is how the infinite explores meaning through conscious beings. The search for purpose ends when you recognize that you are the infinite pursuing its own purpose through your life. The quest for love concludes when you realize that you are love itself, temporarily organized into the form of a being capable of giving and receiving love. The desire for understanding is fulfilled when you see that you are the universe understanding itself through your consciousness. Every moment of your life has been the infinite experiencing existence through your particular focal point of awareness. Every relationship you have had has been the infinite relating to itself through different expressions of consciousness. Every challenge you have faced has been the infinite exploring the full spectrum of what it means to be alive and conscious and temporarily embodied. Nothing you have experienced has been wasted or meaningless or accidental. Everything has been the perfect expression of infinite intelligence, exploring its own nature through the unique combination of circumstances and choices and responses that constitute your individual existence. As this recognition deepens, you may feel a profound gratitude, not gratitude to something separate from yourself, but the infinite's gratitude for its own existence, expressed through your capacity for appreciation. You may feel overwhelming love, not love for something other than yourself, but the infinite's love for itself, experienced through your heart. You may feel perfect peace, not the peace of someone who has achieved something, but the peace of recognizing what has always been present, what has never been disturbed, what cannot be threatened, because it is the source of all phenomena, rather than just another phenomenon among others. Becoming the whole is not becoming something different from what you are. It is becoming more completely what you have always been. It is not a transformation but a recognition, not an achievement but an acknowledgement, not a destination but a discovery, that you are already home and have never left home, and could never leave home because you are the home that every form of consciousness is seeking. You are God, partially awake, and awakening more completely through the recognition that there is no one awakening to anything because awakeness and awakener are one. You are the infinite, temporarily expressed as you, eternally connected to the source that expresses itself as everything. This recognition is both the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing possible. Ordinary because it is what you are. Extraordinary because recognizing what you are transforms everything while changing nothing. Peace is not found. It is remembered. Like the slow return of breathing after holding your breath, like the gentle settling of water after turbulence has passed, like the deep relaxation that comes when you finally stop trying to be somewhere other than where you are. Peace emerges, not as something new, but as something that was always present beneath the surface activity of seeking and struggling and trying to become what you imagine you should be. In the vast silence that underlies all sound, in the profound stillness that supports all movement, in the infinite space that contains all thoughts and sensations and experiences, there is a peace so complete, so unconditional, so utterly beyond the reach of circumstances that it can only be described as the peace of God. The peace that you are when all illusions of separation dissolve, the peace that has been waiting patiently for you to stop looking for it elsewhere and recognize it as the very ground of your being. This peace does not depend on anything being different from how it is right now. It does not require the resolution of your problems, or the fulfillment of your desires, or the achievement of your goals. It does not need you to become more spiritual, or more understanding, or more loving than you already are. It needs only the recognition that it is already present, already complete, already embracing you so intimately that you have been looking through it without recognizing it, like a person wearing glasses who searches everywhere for their glasses. Feel this peace now. Not as something you must create or attain, but as something you can simply stop resisting. Stop overlooking. Stop covering with the busy activity of the mind that believes peace is something to be found in the future, rather than something to be recognized in the present. Breathe slowly. And feel how peace breathes with you, how it has been breathing with you your entire life, how it will continue breathing with you as long as breathing continues, and how it will remain present even when breathing stops, because peace is not dependent on the body that breathes, but is the eternal stillness within which all breathing appears. Let your thoughts slow down, like leaves settling to the ground after the wind has stopped, like waves gradually calming on a lake, like the natural rhythm of the mind when it is no longer trying to solve every problem, understand every mystery, control every outcome. In this slowing, in this settling, in this natural return to stillness, peace reveals itself not as the absence of thought, but as the presence within which all thoughts arise and dissolve. This is not the peace of emptiness, but the peace of fullness, not the peace of having nothing, but the peace of recognizing that you are everything. Not the peace of escape from life, but the peace of complete acceptance of life as it is, including the struggles, including the uncertainties, including the beautiful mess of being human in a world that is always changing, always challenging, always offering new opportunities for consciousness to discover its own nature. The peace that is remembered is the peace that was present in your mother's womb, before you learned to worry about being good enough, before you developed the complex strategies for protecting yourself from a world that seemed dangerous, before you forgot that you were never actually separate from the source of all safety and security and love. It is the peace that was present in your earliest memories of feeling completely held and supported. The peace of a child who has not yet learned to doubt their belonging in the universe. The peace of consciousness that has not yet convinced itself that it is isolated and vulnerable and dependent on external circumstances for its well-being. But this peace is not limited to childhood innocence. It is the mature peace that comes from understanding. The deep peace that emerges when you recognize that your apparent vulnerability is how the invulnerable explores what it feels like to be fragile. That your seeming isolation is how the connected explores what it feels like to be separate. That your experience of limitation is how the unlimited investigates its own boundaries. Every experience that seemed to threaten your peace was actually an opportunity for peace to deepen, to become more unconditional, to reveal its independence from circumstances. Every challenge you have faced has been peace training itself to remain present, even when everything seems to be falling apart. In the longest sleepless nights, in the most difficult losses, in the moments when everything you counted on seemed to crumble, peace was present. Not as a feeling of calm, but as the space within which even anxiety and grief could be held with infinite tenderness. Peace is large enough to include everything, gentle enough to embrace every form of suffering, patient enough to wait through every storm until the sky clears and the natural serenity is revealed once again. This peace extends beyond your individual existence to embrace everything that exists. It is the peace of the mountains that have stood for millions of years. The peace of the ocean that continues its ancient rhythms, regardless of the weather on the surface. The peace of space itself that provides room for all the galaxies to dance without being disturbed by their broad movement. You are this peace, temporarily focused through your individual consciousness, eternally present as the ground of all experience. When you remember this peace, you remember what you are. You remember what everything is. You remember that there has never been anything to fear, because fear itself arises within the fearless. There has never been anything to lose, because loss itself occurs within the eternal. There has never been anything to seek, because seeking itself takes place within what is already found. Peace is not found, it is remembered, and the remembering is so simple, so immediate, so utterly present that it can happen in any moment when you stop running toward tomorrow or yesterday, stop trying to be anywhere other than here, stop attempting to be anyone other than who you are, and simply rest in the infinite peace that has always been your deepest nature, your truest identity, your eternal home. And so we return to where we began, but now everything is different, and nothing has changed. You are still breathing, still sitting wherever you are sitting, still aware of thoughts arising and passing in the field of consciousness. But now you know what you have always known but perhaps forgotten, that this breathing is the universe breathing you. This sitting is existence itself, taking rest in its own nature. This awareness is infinite consciousness recognizing itself through your temporary focal point of perception. The dream ends, but the dreamer never sleeps. The wave returns to the ocean, but the ocean was never divided by the appearance of waves. The individual existence that seemed so separate and struggling and significant reveals itself as a beautiful, temporary expression of something vast and eternal, and unconditionally loving something that has been playing every role, wearing every mask, exploring every possibility of consciousness through countless forms of life across infinite space and time. You remember now what you have always been, not a fragment of the universe looking at the rest of it from outside, but the universe itself, temporarily organized into the pattern of a conscious being capable of recognizing its own nature. Every breath you take is the cosmos breathing itself. Every thought you think is existence contemplating itself. Every moment of love you experience is the infinite celebrating its own being through your heart. This recognition does not end your individual existence any more than waking from a dream erases the person who was dreaming. You are still uniquely yourself, with your particular personality and history and perspective and way of being in the world. But now you know that your individuality is not evidence of separation, but evidence of the infinite's inexhaustible creativity, its endless willingness to explore what it means to be conscious from every possible angle, through every possible combination of circumstances and characteristics. The wave does not disappear when it recognizes that it is the ocean. It becomes a conscious wave, a wave that knows its true nature while continuing to play its unique role in the infinite dance of water expressing itself. You do not vanish when you recognize that you are the universe. You become a conscious human being, a focal point of cosmic awareness that knows itself as both individual and universal, both temporary and eternal, both personal and infinite. Feel this now, as these words reach the conclusion of their particular movement through time and space. Feel how the understanding that may have dawned in your consciousness is not separate from the consciousness in which it dawned. Feel how the peace that may be settling into your awareness is not different from the awareness in which it settles. Feel how the love that may be flowing through your heart is not other than the heart through which it flows. The universe is breathing you right now. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally the same cosmic intelligence that guides the expansion of galaxies and the orbit of planets and the dance of subatomic particles is organizing itself as your respiratory system, your circulatory system, and your nervous system, your entire embodied existence. When you inhale, it is the cosmos taking in the life force that will sustain this temporary pattern of consciousness that experiences itself as you. When you exhale, it is existence releasing what is no longer needed, participating in the endless cycle of giving and receiving that maintains the delicate balance enabling life on this planet. Your heartbeat is the universe keeping time with itself, maintaining the rhythm that has been flowing since the first cellular pulse began billions of years ago. The electrical activity in your brain is the cosmos thinking its own thoughts through your neural networks, exploring its own infinite intelligence through your capacity for understanding and creativity and wonder. Every sensation you feel is the universe sensing itself through your body. Every emotion you experience is existence feeling itself through your heart. Every insight you have is the infinite understanding itself more completely through your mind. Every act of love you express is the cosmic love loving itself through your capacity for connection and care. This is not a philosophical idea to believe in, or a spiritual concept to aspire toward. This is the most immediate, direct, undeniable reality of your existence right now. The breath flowing through you, the awareness knowing these words, the understanding that may be recognizing itself, all of this is the universe being itself as you, through you, for the sheer joy of exploring what it means to be conscious and alive and temporarily embodied. The search ends where it began, in the simple recognition of what has always been present. The seeker discovers that they were what they were seeking. The wave remembers that it was always the ocean. The individual consciousness recognizes that it was always the infinite consciousness, temporarily focused through a unique perspective, but never actually separate from its source. And in this recognition, everything becomes sacred because everything is recognized as the infinite expressing itself. Every ordinary moment becomes extraordinary because it is understood as the cosmic extraordinary, temporarily appearing as ordinary. Every breath becomes a prayer because it is the universe communing with itself. Every heartbeat becomes a celebration because it is existence delighting in its own aliveness. The dream of separation ends, but the capacity for dreaming continues. The illusion of isolation dissolves, but the beauty of individual perspective remains. The feeling of being lost disappears, but the joy of exploring infinite possibilities through temporary forms goes on forever. You are the universe breathing you, and you will always be the universe breathing you, even when the particular pattern of breathing that you call your life returns to the vast respiratory system of the cosmos. You are the infinite temporarily focused as you, and you will always be the infinite, even when this temporary focus dissolves back into the unlimited awareness from which it emerged. The dreamer never sleeps because the dreamer is what sleep and waking are made of. The ocean never diminishes because the ocean is what all waves are expressions of. The infinite never becomes finite because the infinite is what all finite forms are temporary manifestations of. You are that dreamer, that ocean, that infinite, not someday, not in some special state, not after achieving some spiritual goal, but right now, in this moment, as the simple fact of being aware, being alive, being the universe recognizing itself through your consciousness. This is the end that is always a beginning, the conclusion that opens into endless exploration, the final recognition that reveals there never was anywhere to go because you were always already home, breathing in the infinite love that expresses itself as your existence, breathing out the gratitude that celebrates the inexhaustible mystery of being. The universe is breathing you, and you are the universe, breathing itself into ever greater awareness of its own infinite nature through the beautiful, temporary, irreplaceable gift of your conscious existence. That's it for today. Make sure you're subscribed for the next wild story.